Hi, this is Ofoy Murray, the digital reader, and what I wanted to talk about today was kind of how I feel about Barnes & Nobles and kind of why it's personal to me and it may not appeal to other people. I would say to anyone, if they're interested in getting into ebook reading, that really your first ebook reader should just be a Kindle, because it really brings you into the experience. You can buy, read, and browse all in the same place. There's no trick formats. There's no converting formats. You just see a book you want, you buy it, and you read it, and you really get used to the digital book reading experience. Although I would strongly recommend to anyone who's getting a Kindle, make sure that you have the Kindle app on your computer, so that way you can download your books to your computer and store them for prosperity, whatever you want to do with them. So definitely, just like most people, the first e-reader I got was a Kindle. But as time passed, I slowly began converting all of my ebooks to the EPUB format. So wherever I would get them from, I would convert them to the EPUB format. And so I became interested in an e-reader for me personally that could read EPUBs. Now the Kindle in a way can read EPUBs because you can't read EPUBs on the Kindle, but the Kindle you can send EPUBs to the Kindle and it will be converted to EPUBs. So you could do it that way, and I thought about doing it that way, but it didn't really appeal to me to do that for all the EPUBs I was beginning to collect. So the other options I looked at the Kindle's biggest competitor in the US, which is really the Kobo e-reader. And when I looked at the Kobo e-reader, they allowed you to use EPUBs. They had comparable features to the Amazon Kindle. But after looking at them, my two biggest issues were, for me, Kobo e-readers seem to be poorly made. And also for me, they seem to be very slow. The other issue I had is I convert all my books to EPUBs, and I use the universally accepted EPUB format. And on modern Kobos, EPUBs don't really format that well. So if you just have a plain box standard EPUB, it doesn't really format that well on the Kobo, and it's tricky changing fonts. And that's because Kobo has moved to their preferred digital format, which is KPUB, which is the Kobo's version of the EPUB. And they did that. A lot of reasons they did that is because once they started introducing e-readers that had note-taking, they wanted to reflect that in their different formats that you could write notes on books and stuff. So they began selling their books in a specifically tweaked version of EPUB. So for me, it was either take all my EPUBs, convert them to KPUB when I was reading on KPUB, or take my EPUBs and then send them to Amazon to have them converted to Amazon's format. So that's kind of why I was just like, I want a e-reader that excels at reading box standard EPUBs, and also where the experience of putting an EPUB that is my personal EPUB on it, I can keep track of it across devices. And that's another reason where the Kobo kind of really falls flat, is for the books you buy on their site, they keep track of where you are, they keep track of bookmarks, that's all wonderful. For the books that you put on there, they call it side loading. So if you side load a book, basically you have your own personal EPUB and you put it on the Kobo. You can, they really struggle with synchronization of your own personal EPUBs. You can use Dropbox, I believe, but it's not really a terribly elegant solution. So all of those things were why I kind of ended up with the e-reader I chose, the Pocketbook e-reader. So when I talk about the biggest competitor to Kindle, and I talk about Kobo, a lot of people are saying, well, what about Barnes and Nobles? And now I'm going to kind of get to the meat of it. When I looked at the Barnes and Noble Nook, I am a person who only reads my book digitally. My whole book collection, except for two books actually, is digital. So for me, it's very important, wherever I'm buying my books from, that they give me as much bells and whistles as they can for digital books. And what also is incredibly important to me is that they have an app for PC or Mac so that I can download the books that I buy onto my computer and save or convert those books for my own personal library. And for the Nook, I was really disappointed in a couple things. First thing I was disappointed in is that the Nook no longer has an app for your Mac or your PC. So that means that any books you buy, any ebooks you buy for the Nook can only go on the Nook and the Nook app. And that means that if you're buying those books, you have to jump through a huge amount of hoops to get your books and store them on your computer. It's not as difficult on a PC, but on a Mac it's a huge pain because you have to get this special program that can read Android devices, and it's just a huge pain. So I was really disappointed that they don't have an app for Mac and PC. The other thing that really isn't so much a disappointment, but just as another wrinkle, I guess, is that I had assumed that Barnes & Nobles used Adobe Digital Editions to store their books, which I prefer because several different book sites use Adobe Digital Editions, which means that if you buy a book using Adobe Digital Editions, you can move it amongst any device that uses Adobe Digital Editions. And if you have an e-reader that uses Adobe Digital Editions, then you can buy a book from any ebook store that downloads those books in Adobe Digital Editions, which means you can buy from Kindle, you can buy from ebooks.com, you can buy from Smashwords, you can buy from the Google Play Store, where of course with Amazon, you can just only buy from Amazon. Now admittedly, Amazon has more books than all those other places, but still, I just like being able to spread the wealth. So that was a big issue to me. And it definitely got the feeling to me that Barnes & Nobles really entered the digital book space because they felt they had to, not because they wanted to. I mean, Amazon is a very strong presence in the digital book space, but I feel like Amazon really is just selling digital books because it makes money. They don't really have a horse in the race about the integrity of the physically written word. They'll sell you a lawnmower, they'll sell you face cream, they'll sell you a book digitally, a comic digitally. Don't make a difference to them. It's all money. Where I feel Barnes & Nobles, they have a particular interest in keeping physical books alive. And that's kind of what I mean by the way Barnes & Nobles does their site. I will be stunned if at some point Barnes & Nobles doesn't come up with some book club or some extra fee where when you buy a physical book, you automatically get the digital book, because it feels like they want to sell you physical books. They want you to come into the stores or they want you to order those books online, but they want to sell you physical books. I feel that the whole idea of the Nook and the whole idea of their ebooks is really more of an afterthought. I don't think that they're doing it because they feel they would make money. I think they're doing it because for their loyal customers who come in to buy physical books, they also want to give them an option to buy those books digitally if they want to go ahead and get a Nook. So I feel like Barnes & Nobles, their whole business model is starting to change to come into our stores, buy our books, buy our Nooks, and we want you to buy a physical book. And if you happen to buy a digital book, that's fine, but we would really prefer you buy a digital book and a physical book, because we want to make very clear to you that any digital book you buy from us, you do not own. It stays on the Nook, and it is only a thing you have access to because you have a Nook. For me, that doesn't work. For people who prefer physical books, I think it's an excellent model. And that's why I really think it would be cool. It wouldn't work out for me, but for people who buy physical books, I think it would be really cool if there was like $150 a year or $99 a year that you could pay in a Barnes & Noble's club, where wherever you bought a physical book for, you would automatically get the digital edition. Or whenever you bought a physical book for an extra 20% or 25%, you would automatically get the digital edition. I think that would be cool, and that would fit in Barnes & Noble's business model. But for me, as a digital reader, I can't be bothered with Barnes & Noble's. They're just not made for people who really want to read and own their own digital content. So that's kind of why I say I can't stand Barnes & Noble's. Can't be bothered. The honest truth is, I don't go to physical bookstores. There's no real reason to. I surf the web. I look at booktubers. All my book searching and stuff I find of interest is done digitally, and then I digitally go get the book. I go to Smashwords if it's a smaller independent author. I go to ebooks.com is my first choice, and then if I can't get it on ebooks.com, then I'll go pick it up on Amazon. And of course, at least currently, you can only get comics on Amazon. There are a couple other sites that let you see them, but once again, on Amazon, you can purchase your comic, and once anything I purchase, I convert to a format that I can use long term. So those are just my thoughts. It'll be interesting to hear people's comments on how they feel about Barnes & Noble's. The Nook is a nice device, but once again, the Nook to me is it's less of an e-reader and more of an extension of Barnes & Noble's physical bookstores, because of the fact that all your books are either on the device or the Barnes & Noble's app. It is not meant for you to create your own personal library of digital books. So those are my thoughts. This is Ofori, the digital reader. I'd like to hear your comments, and keep reading.